18 session. So today we are having a topic on organizing palliative care services. It will be taken by Mr.BINOD HARIHARAN. So we can start with sir's presentation, followed by its discussion. We can wind up our session by 4:30. Over to Dr. Sridevi.
Thank you, Raju, and thank you all for logging in again on time and be a part of the session. I'm glad to welcome Vinod for taking another session for this group of participants on organizing palliative care services. Vinod is one of the trustees of Pallium India, been associated with Pallium India's work for since the beginning. So welcome, Vinod.
Thank you, Sridevi. Everyone is in. Shall we go ahead?
Yeah, we can start.
Raju, are you going to share the screens, the slides?
Yes, sir. So can you see it?
Yes, I can. I'm stopping my video. So I have a data limitation, sir.
Okay, sure, sir.
So hi, everyone. This is going to be slightly different, probably from what we have been, the kind of sessions that we have been having so far. And I'm sure most of the sessions that you've had so far would have been around pain management, communication skills, the medical aspects, evaluation of a patient's pain, all those kind of things. And even maybe I think you have also covered a session on how to procure opioids and dispense it, store it, etc. Right, Raju? That is also over.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we are not going to cover any of those things here. So this is going to be slightly different. It would be around organizing palliative care in your setting. So what we have seen quite often with people who have undergone the palliative care training in our center is that once we go through these sessions around patient management, pain management, all those things, a lot of people get quite excited and they really want to go forward and offer some services to the patients and families in their institutions or in and around their home, wherever. Just hold on, just a moment.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, hello?
Yes, sir. You
Hello?
can continue.
Yeah. So once you get to that point of wanting to do something new, starting off offering these kind of services, what happens is you end up facing a lot of practical difficulties going forward. Like it could be, it could start off right from the point of getting your teammates or your your team members, like other doctors, nurses around you, to be convinced, get them convinced around the need for offering these kind of services. It could be about convincing your management around offering these services. It might mean sometimes that you may not be able to justify the the requirements in terms of the financial gains. That is probably what comes to the mind of the senior management in most hospitals, the private hospitals especially. So we are going to cover a few of these areas. So can we have the next slide, please? So we'll cover topics around volunteering, collaborating, advocacy, and fundraising. And feel free to interrupt me whenever along the way, and I'll be happy to answer your queries. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is something which you're quite familiar with, I'm sure. The WHO definition of palliative care, which essentially says it's about improving the quality of life of the patients and their families. And it says it's about treating the pain, other symptoms, physical, psychosocial, and spiritual. Now, if you take a closer look, you can see that it is not too different from the definition, the WHO definition of health, right? Sorry, is it too much of trouble? I mean, the surrounding noise. I can look for another place nearby.
Sir, you have a headset with you, sir?
Sorry?
You have a headset with you?
Yes, I am
You...
using a headset, in fact.
Okay, sir, can
I'm
you
using my headset.
then? Because it is a little bit disturbance background.
I am at the airport. Just let me try to find a less noisy corner. Just hold on.
Okay.
Is it better now?
Yes, sir, it is.
I think it was better. Just keep your microphone close. So that your voice is clear.
Binod, sir?
Yeah. So I'm using the headphones. Let me see.
Okay, sir. So keep the microphone closer to your mouth so that...
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, it is not much different from the definition of health, as the WHO puts it. Again, it's about offering physical, psychosocial. Treating physical, psychosocial, and spiritual needs of a patient. Now, what we see is, often it's a huge challenge for us. Um, like, it's much easier to look at the patient's physical problems and address those. Comparatively. So, as you have probably um, understood by now, we are talking about total pain, right? Which includes not just the physical pain, it includes all these other psychosocial and spiritual pain also. Now, when you get into those domains, uh, the, the health system is ill equipped often to take care of these things, and the loads, especially if we are talking about the government system, where you are already having so much of constraints, it is going to be even more of a challenge. So therein lies the challenge, and how do we overcome that? Definitely, you need access to much more resources to be able to do these kind of interventions, to be able to provide psychosocial and spiritual support to a patient, and that's where most of these topics coming, like volunteering, collaborating, advocacy or fundraising, etc. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So the basic question is, we understand what palliative care is. Who is supposed to take care of this? Whose business is it providing palliative care? Now, we believe that palliative care is everyone's business. It is not just about the medical fraternity, the medical professionals. Um, when I say medical professionals, I'm talking about um, doctors, nurses, maybe even social workers, etc. So it doesn't stop there. And probably that is one of the major innovations that happened in palliative care in Kerala back in 1992-93. Because what happened was the community got involved, and that changed a lot of these things. Um, like the people started demanding more. They were also ready to come forward and offer help in providing this kind of help, in this kind of services. So today we consider palliative care as not just the health professionals or the medical systems business. It is everyone's business. Can we have the next slide? So if you look at the current, just hold on, healthcare system, we have at the macro level, if you look at it, the hospitals, the government hospitals, medical colleges, whatnot, and at the micro level, we are talking about your home, right? The patient's home, because whatever whatever said and done after all these years, it has always been the family, the immediate family, who has been the primary care provider for any patient, for that matter. And without that support at the micro level, um, I don't think any healthcare would be practically possible.
Binod sir?
Yeah, there was an announcement. Sorry. Okay. So sorry about that. So now there is a level in between which we call the meso level. Raju? Yeah. Now this is the level that we are going to. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's continue. So this meso level is what we're going to talk about, and once we get to that area, that level, the things become very interesting, because this is the community that we're talking about, which can make a huge difference in delivering palliative care. So just yeah. So here we call this the social capital. Because why we call it a capital? Because this is something, it's a huge resource out there which is lying untapped, and if we are able to properly tap into this, it's a treasure box essentially, um, which which can which can offer a solution to most of the problems that we find are major challenges, in delivering palliative care. So the the volunteering that we're going to talk about is this community. What you see, at the meso level, it's between the current healthcare system, the macro level, and the family, which is at the micro level. So next slide, please. So if you look at the definition of volunteer, it says someone who is willing to take up an assignment, some responsibility or some project without anyone's forcing him or asking him to do so. I'll give you a small example. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. So K.N. Nair is so he's now probably 65. Um, he joined the army at the age of 17, retired in 92, and in 2002, when his wife was 45, she was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Now, that it was not like, they went to the doctor in 2002 and they got this diagnosis. Actually, what had happened was, he had taken her to quite a few doctors, but unfortunately, she was never asked to undergo a pap smear test, which was supposed to have been done right at the beginning. And by the time this was diagnosed, it was too late. And then they went through the usual struggle, the pain, the rest of the suffering. And in 2004, she just hold on. Sorry. So So it was a really frustrating experience for him, obviously. And if you look at it from his perspective, going through this whole journey of the doctor shopping, going from one hospital to another, getting all these tests done, and then in the end, there comes a point when the health system, which is supposed to take care of you, comes back and says, it's it's too late, nothing more can be done. And and they also tell you something very cruel, like, in this particular case, the doctor even asks this gentleman, why didn't you bring her to me earlier? Now, at this point, typically people tend to react, and the reaction could be different from different people. Sometimes it might be, um, the anger could be, um, it could be in terms of going and taking some kind of a legal action, or filing a lawsuit, or it could be even physical terms sometimes, going to the doctor, or it could be a physical abuse on the doctor or the health experts, whoever it is. But this gentleman chose to do something else. He channelized his anger, and then he decided, what happened to me and my wife should not happen to someone else. And he decided to dedicate his life to the cause of palliative care. Now he went to, initially I believe it was the IMA. They have a home care team in Cochin, sorry, in Trivandrum. And then he came to Palim, India. Now, in Palim, India, he started off with the home care team again, going with them, accompanying them, helping them with the day-to-day tasks. Um, Eventually, he started taking over the role of a leader for an entire team. The city home care team was actually controlled by him. So he started looking at, uh, organizing planning the whole activity for the team, um, understanding the needs of the patient. By this time, he had more knowledge about the medical this thing, especially around cancer, that he could understand most of the things that the patients or the families were talking about, or their concerns and other things. So he became practically a full-time palliative care volunteer, working with Palim India 24/7. Now, why I told you this story was, next slide please. We need to understand a few things before we actually engage with a palliative care volunteer, or for that matter, any volunteer. Now, the two questions which we need to find an answer for. First, what makes them do it, and what are they looking for? I'm sure if you try to find out the answers to these two questions, what makes them do it, and what are they looking for, then it would be much easier to to actually design something which can offer them, which something meaningful, which would be which would make them happier, and they tend to keep on contributing to it. Now, how do we understand that? What makes someone take up volunteering? Most often, what we find is there is a story behind every single volunteer. Just like I told you about K and Nair's story, there are a million stories, untold stories out there. And I'm not saying that every single person who has gone through this kind of an experience will ultimately turn into a volunteer. No. But what I'm trying to say is, when someone comes forward as a volunteer, you can be sure that there is a story that he wants to say, or there is a story behind his taking this initiative. It could be an experience that he has had in his own family, or for an experience that he has seen that a neighbor had gone through, or it could be one of his friends or whoever. So if we really try to understand what is it that is making them to do this, it makes it easier for us to communicate with him. It makes it easier for us to come out with something which is really interesting and exciting for that person. Now, next slide, please. Yeah. So the typical question that comes up in you, what can a volunteer do? I would say anything from social support, which typically is the area which most of us consider volunteers to be involved more in. But it doesn't stop with social support. It could be advocacy, fundraising, um, assisting the team. Like we're talking about Dr. Mr. Nair, who actually started off supporting the team and eventually becoming a leader for that entire team. So it did not stop even there. I mean, we have had always had in Palim India, we have always had a volunteer as our treasurer. So basically, the treasurer is supposed to take care of the funds of the organization, how the money is spent, where it is spent, how effectively it is being utilized, and all those things. Now, now, having such people in the environment is good, but it comes with its own set of challenges. So, unless we are clear about these challenges also, we may not be able to fully utilize the social capital that we're talking about in the form of volunteers. So yeah, and let us not forget that a trained volunteer could actually be involved in direct patient care. It could even be someone who has had a training as a nurse or a doctor who comes forward to offer these kind of services. So it is not just the office work or the support work that you can expect that person to do. It could be anything. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, but then, as I said, it comes with its own a set of challenges. Um, like one of the major challenges is getting them um, to put in their heart and soul, put in their those long hours, getting them to commit to a fixed time, or a few days a week, whatever it is. That is the understanding. Now, it also means that they need to undergo some kind of training, so that most often you find the volunteer comes forward with the heart or the mind, the willingness to offer some help, to help the patient or the family. But as all of us know, that is not good enough. We should also ensure that what we are trying to do, even if the heart is there, we should also have the knowledge and the skill to deliver the, the, the care that we're talking about. Like one small example would be a bedridden patient um, who is very vulnerable, who is prone to an infection, or whose immunity is down. If a volunteer does not take the adequate precautions um, in terms of maintaining the proper hygiene and whatever, it could actually be detrimental to the health of the patient, and sometimes it can even have disastrous effects, right? So any volunteer should definitely undergo a training, and it's not just enough that they undergo a training. We should also make sure that they are properly supervised and periodically evaluated
Raju?
Yes, doctor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, we didn't hear for
Yeah.
some time. I thought.
Okay. Sorry about that. So where did I lose you? Hello.
Raju, I couldn't hear for last 2 minutes. Was it the same with you all?
Yes, sir. I think with the second point, I
Yeah.
can start from the second point onwards, sir.
Okay. So I was talking about the person, having the right kind of qualifications, apart from the enthusiasm to do these things, because unless that person has the skill set and the knowledge to deliver what he's promising to do, like for example, if he's supporting you with, maintaining the accounts, he should have some accounting background. He should be well versed with maintaining those records, the books of accounts, and all those things. If it is technology where the person has the additional knowledge or skill set, maybe we can use them, or get his services to improve some of those technological aspects in providing the care, like for example maintaining a patient database or things like that. And what I would also like to highlight here is that we should be careful about the volunteers not coming forward. Um, uh, Coming forward with ulterior motives. There are situations that we have faced where someone comes forward to be a volunteer, but then you realize after a point of time that he or she has other interests which are not actually helpful for the patients or the family in the long run. So that is also something which we need to be cautious about. Um, Having said that, there are situations where someone may have some personal gains. Like for example, in Kerala, what we have seen is there are many political parties who have taken up palliative care as part of their what you call the agenda. Um, yeah, it's debatable whether it is good or bad, but ultimately that has actually helped a lot of families and patients and families in distress. And in the process, they have also gained in terms of getting more votes and getting to power, especially at the what you call the grassroots level, the panchayat level, and district level, etc. So when we think about volunteers, we should also understand these things so that we are in a better position to manage them more effectively. Next slide, please.
So we can have questions at the end, sir.
Okay, next. Now, coming to collaboration. So the definition is pretty simple and straightforward, but believe me, it is much more trickier than what it seems. The next slide. Now, the scenario has been changing. I'm not sure how many of you are from within India and how many outside the country. Raju, you have any figures?
All are within India only, sir.
All within India. Okay. So, so I think many of us understand that the scenario within India has changed quite a lot over the last few years as far as palliative care is concerned, especially after the announcement of the National Program for Palliative Care by the central government, and some funding available, at least if not totally adequate, um, some funding available from the central government for implementation of palliative care at the government level, the government hospitals, essentially. So now it's not just that. The number of NGOs, when I say NGOs, I mean non-government organizations and community-based organizations, the CBOs, they have also grown in number over the last few years. So What that means is, okay, there are more people coming forward to offer palliative care. Um, that is a good part of it. But then the problem is you need to be able to work with these organizations effectively to ensure that the best of uh, care reaches the patient and the family. Because if we don't focus on that particular aspect of working together, that's what I say. I mean, that is a simpler way of looking at it. When we talk about collaborations, it's about working together. um, and I'm sure all of you would have had um, your own experiences working with groups, even within your institutions, if it is a hospital or another domain. So it is challenging, but then we cannot avoid that either. So as the number of players increase, the more the need to have a collaborative work environment. Next. So this is an example of how one. I've just taken the example of Pallium India. Now, if Pallium India were to offer palliative care services in Trivandrum, the number of uh, touch points or the number of patients that we alone would be able to address would be maybe in terms of a few hundreds or a few thousands. But then the total need out there would definitely not be in terms of a few thousands. It would run into tens of thousands of patients and families. So how do we address that huge need? One way of working, one way of solving this problem is naturally by working with other entities. For example, here, what I've shown as link 1, link 2, link 3, we call uh, any of these connections or the collaborations that we have, we call them link centers. Like it could be a government hospital, for example, Trivandrum Medical College. We provide palliative care. When I say we provide the palliative care, we have our own team going there on a daily basis, um, half a day, to provide an OP clinic, to run an OP clinic within the government medical college. Now, that is one such link center. It could be, another link center could be like an NGO, another NGO, which is interested in providing palliative care to that local community. So we work with them. Most often, our team, the home care team, goes from Pallium India with their volunteers joining us, the team, and then going out and reaching out to these patients. So each one could be a different model, a different relationship. But then the advantage is that once we do that, the number of patients to whom we can reach out to would multiply. Like you can imagine the number of patients and the kind of patients that you'll be able to find in a government medical college. So it is the, most of the needy patients would actually come to the government medical college and not to some private institution. So if we have a working relationship with that institution, that means we are able to address a larger community of needy individuals. Now, next slide, please. Just as an example, again, I would take the case of Sita. Sita is a palliative care patient. She had a surgery in her spine, and then she was paralyzed. Just hold on.
Press unmuted. Muted. Or has muted is.
Sir will be joining in soon. I think there is some announcement going on in airport.
Okay, sorry about that. So she uh, initially she had her uh, pain and other physical problems which need to be sorted out, which definitely, I mean, which in India, the team, the doctors and the nurses, the physiotherapists got involved, sorted those things out. But then that doesn't solve the problem, does it? Now, what happens when such a patient goes back to her home? Now, it's a it's it's a new life for that person and for the family. It's what you would say the new normal, and unless that person is capable or trained and given empowered to take up that new to address or to handle that new situation, uh, it is going to be it's going to be a disaster in the long run. Now, what does that mean? Now, we have seen most often you find people being offered wheelchairs. Um, in Kerala, it is a regular scene that we find someone volunteering and coming forward, sponsoring a wheelchair for a patient. But if you look at your own homes, how many of our homes are wheelchair friendly? I would say probably none, unless we have had someone in the family who was in a wheelchair or is in a wheelchair, and then we have modified our house accordingly. So unless the house is modified to meet the needs of this the person on wheelchair, it doesn't make sense putting him on a wheelchair and saying, okay, now this is how you're going to be today onwards. So that training needs to be done, the modification needs to be done. Now, in this particular scenario, this is where some of the good neighbors stepped in and said, okay, we'll make those modifications for her, Sita, and then they actually changed some of the design in the within the house, provided a ramp, and made the toilets also wheelchair friendly. So that part of it was solved. Then came the access to the house. There was no motorable road, or there was no proper access to her house. So then again, some of the neighbors said, okay, we'll provide a bit more land, and then the panchayat stepped in and said, okay, now we'll try to make sure that this is a motorable road, maybe not tarring, but at least a pakka road. So, or rather a kacha road. So that was taken out of the system. Then comes the next problem. What about a livelihood for her? So someone comes forward and teaches her how to make jewelry um, from the jewelry kits that you find. So she learned how to do it. She starts making jewelry. But then the biggest challenge is that, once you make the stuff, how do you sell it? So then again, some of our volunteers came forward and said, um, let us um, let us teach her how to sell this online over Facebook. Now, Sita never ever had used a computer in her life. She had to be taught how to use the computer. And then again, you need an internet connection. So the local cable company come forward and say, we'll provide an internet connection. So all this coming together, now she's the only earning member in a family, and she even supports her parents who are also sick, old and sick, and she is a real life hero today. But all this was possible because so many people stepped in. There was a collaborative effort from different entities. Talim India was there to take care of some of her requirements. Individuals, the neighborhood got involved. They put in their whatever they could offer. The panchayat came forward and did their bit. There were donors who came forward offering a computer or an internet connection. So all these people coming together, the problem for Sita is solved, or at least a large part of the problem is solved. So that is the kind of collaborative working that we are talking about. Next, I think we'll skip through these slides. Next. So this is something which we need to keep in mind. When we talk about collaboration, let us not imagine that we are trying to help someone grow stronger. It is always about, because we are humans, we have our own basic instincts, and which includes greed, envy, all those things. We are just human beings, so we tend to look at any situation and see how we can grow stronger ourselves. So that is the case with anyone whom we are dealing with. Like if you are taking the case of the medical college, I'm sure the medical college authorities would be looking at how to improve their services, how to improve their services to the patient, improve their facilities, and getting the help from someone like Palim India or another NGO to make that happen. From the other side, if you look at it from Palim India's perspective, again, they would be looking at, how can we work with the government medical college and grow stronger, offer more services to the patients. So it is always about making ourselves stronger. It is not a bad thing as long as it helps the other person also grow stronger. Now, if we have that in mind, things can be worked out. There are new possibilities which could emerge. Next slide, please. Next. And once we reach that point, we also find there is one more need. When too many people are in the picture trying to solve a problem, it also means that you need to have some kind of leadership in place so that things fall into place. The someone to set the direction, keep it going in that direction, and getting better results. So Devi, the question is, who is that leader? Now, this is often where we find most of the people who have the heart and even the skill, the knowledge and the skill to offer some kind of help or even palliative care, they find themselves faltering. We tend to imagine that, if I'm in a hospital, it is the management who needs to take the leadership. Just hold on. Okay, so that um, so if we wait for the hospital management to take that leadership and come forward and then take care of all the other requirements and ask us to provide our ask us to play our role, maybe as a doctor or a nurse or a social worker, that is never going to happen. It always starts with me. The next slide, please. So the way I would say it is I, which is important. And this I also stands for a few things. It starts with a process of inquiry. When I say the process of inquiry, it is about asking those tough questions, what is it that what I'm planning to do, or what is it that I would like to do? What is it that is going to give me satisfaction? What is it that our patients need, their family members need? Now those are the critical questions for which we need to find our own answers. Why that is important is again because if you look at India, it is I would I would rather look at it as a European Union, right? Where it is an union of different countries. Even though we call it states, each state in India is a different country. The culture is different. The the, the educational level, the whatever what you call the indices that we talk about, um, GDP or whatever it is all different from place to place. And and because of that, what works in one particular area, what works in Kerala may not necessarily work in UP or Bihar. So we need to have the ability to find our own solutions, and that is the second point that we are talking about, the innovation. Now innovation, when I say innovation, again I'd rather take the example of Kerala. There was a huge innovation the uh, in the field of palliative care globally, because until that point where it was in 92-93 when actually palliative care services were being offered to the community in Kerala, in Kozhikode to be precise. That's one of the districts in Kerala. It was imagined that this kind of care is something only the developed countries would be able to provide. And there was no model for the developing world because of the financial challenges involved. Now, what happened in Kerala was very interesting. Here, for the first time in the world, the community got involved in healthcare. Now, that I believe was a major innovation, and that is probably the only reason why it gained more traction. It went forward. It became kind of a healthcare movement in Kerala. And even today, when we talk about palliative care in the country, um, probably Kerala figures right up there, at the number one spot. Now, so that is the kind of innovation that we need to have, which we need to have in every single part of the country. And it's not just a country; it might be applicable to an institution as well. Then comes the next please. Once that innovation happens, that it's an inspiration, becomes an inspiration for many people around. People start seeing things which they believe or which they never believed would be possible. And when they start seeing that change, more and more people would be convinced, and they would in turn start looking at getting more involved, or like for example, today at least 20 of you from around the country, from different parts of the country, are joining in over a Zoom platform to learn more about palliative care, because somewhere you have read or known about this and it was inspiring, I believe. So that is the kind of inspiration which gives it a broader impact, a bigger impact, a global, sometimes it could be a national income, it could also be a global impact. Like in this particular scenario, the community-led palliative care movement was actually, it had a global impact, in the sense, people in different parts of the world are now looking at whether they can actually duplicate this model in their own cities. And some of the countries have really done that also, at least some of the developing countries. Next. Now then, it's the ripple effect, as we call it. The individual makes a huge impact, and then it impacts the society, the community, and it is the ripple effect which takes it forward. So if you ask me, what is the key to this, a good collaborative working? It's very simple, straightforward. It's understanding what each of the other partners, whether it is institutions, individuals, organizations, whatever it may be, what each of these partners are looking for, and what the common goal is. And how do you, just hold on. So how do we know what each of the other partners want or what they need is? It is simple, straightforward. It's just about listening, which is exactly what we are supposed to do in palliative care. Active listening. Um, I'm sure you must have spent a lot of time on this, um, improving your communication skills in palliative care. So this is exactly the same thing what we are talking about: listening, active listening. Next. So advocacy, as the name suggests, it is advocating for someone or for a cause. And how does it create an impact? Why is it relevant? Often we are ignorant of some of the challenges that the community is facing, unless it is brought forward by someone or some organization or institution to our notice. It could be directly by the government sometimes, or it could be by certain NGOs or individuals who take it up as their what do you call, their duty or their um, passion to do that. So advocacy is something which, next slide, helps change attitudes and behaviors. Sometimes it can bring about new policies. Like for example, in Kerala, we had a national, Kerala palliative care policy, which was announced in 2008. Remember that the whole palliative care movement started off in 92, 93, and it was not until 2008, which is at least 15 years after that, when the government actually came forward and announced a palliative care policy. Now, even today, if you look at it across India, we have only 3 states who have had some progress towards having a palliative care policy in the state. So a long way to go. Okay, but then those kind of things have a much bigger impact. It can solve the problems for much larger community. It's not just about a few individuals, few patients and the families that we individually can hope to touch. And it also means giving whatever work that we are doing a broader impact. So I believe each one of us should be able to contribute our bit to it, and it starts with promoting this concept to anyone whom we come across. It could be talking about palliative care, the need. um, when you have an opportunity, it could be striking off a conversation with someone who is sitting next to you in your in a train or an aircraft. But then that that awareness is something which we can't avoid. And the best part is it also helps in fundraising. You can think of many examples where the awareness about a particular disease, for example, ALS. You might have all heard about that ice bucket challenge taken up by it was a global what do you call a social media challenge, um, across Facebook, WhatsApp, uh, most of these social media. So what happened was some of the celebrities, um, some of the celebrities came forward and did this challenge, and then that created awareness. And in the process, the ALS Foundation raised millions of dollars for this particular cause. So, so that's why I said it also helps in fundraising. Next, but if you look at the local level, the simplest thing that we can think about is creating this awareness among the local bodies, senior government officials who can make a difference, who can influence the government policies. It could be the local clubs or the associations where we get a chance to talk about this, the need. Um, of this list, I would say the schools, colleges would be one of the priority areas, because that is, as the saying goes, catch them young. Because at that age, if we start talking about these concepts of palliative care, there is a much higher chance of the children absorbing these concepts. Because the older we grow, we find less receptive to new ideas and concepts. So, so I think that is something which we should have a focus on, and also the press and other media, and I would say the social media included, because that is where you can have a much bigger impact without major costs involved. Otherwise, we'll have to put in a lot of money into advertising and promotion if you need to really spread the word. So next, Rajiv, how much time do we have? Another 10 minutes?
Another 7 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we cannot go through, go through these topics in detail, unfortunately, because of the time restrictions. Um, but what I'd like to do here is touch upon some of the basic concepts so that you can um, sorry, you can yourself look up and find out more about these topics. So fundraising, one thing to keep in mind is typically people tend to think that a good salesperson would be a good fundraiser, which is not actually the case, because fundraising is not about salesmanship or selling. the fundamental difference here is that in the case of fundraising, both the donor and the and yourself, we are both on the same side of the table. We are trying to work together and find a solution for someone else's problem, typically a patient or his family. So it is about, again, as I said earlier, working together with a donor. Now, why is a donor working with you? Because obviously he understands that there is a need, one. Number two, he also understands that working with you, he'll be able to reach out to this set of people, Mr. Long. Sorry, I hope it's our last small break. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So, um, so fundraiser, or rather the service care provider and the donor, both are on the same side, and the donor understands this. The person, when I say donor, it's the person who is, supporting the cause, someone who is supporting you or your organization to actually provide this service. Um, so they also understand that working with you, they they are much better off. They have a very high chance of achieving their objective, reaching out to these patients and supporting these families. So that is the only reason why a donor should think of working with you. So it's not about raising money. Now, fundraising is always about solving a problem for the community, for a patient, or his family. So that also, next slide, that also means that we all need to be storytellers, because this is something which comes to us naturally. We've all been taught the art of storytelling right from our childhood days. We grew up hearing stories from our grandparents, our parents, and we keep doing the same thing with our children. And these are the stories are the ones that influence us the most. And if it is real life stories, nothing better than that. So when I say storytelling, it's not about some cooked up story. It should be about real life uh, situations, real life people and their situations, which influences people, their decision making. So today I was talking about Mr. Nair. I also talked about Sita, because those are stories, real life stories, which I'm sure none of us will ever forget. And that is why I feel that the most effective way to fundraise or to advocate is to keep selling these stories. And often we also find, confused as to taking a decision. What is it that we should ask this particular donor? Obviously, we don't know how much money he or she or an entity is planning to give, and the only way to find out what their interests are, what they're willing to provide or support with, is by listening to them again. So it is again coming back to active listening, the same thing what we discussed about earlier, the same thing what you have gone through in the case of building communication skills in palliative care. I'm sure that is going to be the most helpful when it comes to fundraising also. There are many possible sources for funding right now. I mean, even the government, as I said earlier, there is a national program. There are state level programs that are running. There are government grants. There are also corporates, big corporates, who are supposed to spend a percentage of their income on what they call corporate social responsibility programs, CSR activities. So a lot of opportunities out there if you really need money going forward. But then it is up to you to decide what works for you the best, what what your capabilities or your what you call strengths are, and work accordingly. Like for example, if it is in the case of organizing events, which we have seen often enough, a popular singer coming forward and having a rock show or a concert, which again helps raise funds for a specific activity or for a cause. There are grants, as we discussed earlier, but then that involves project writing skills, budgeting, presentation skills, etc. And it could be campaigns like the Ice Bucket Challenge or those kind of things, which can also make a major impact. So these are possibilities, and the list goes on and on. It is up to us to identify what is the ideal thing for us, what our strengths are, what we can realistically hope to achieve with our strengths and our weaknesses. So I think we'll conclude here. Raju?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vinod. Thank you for taking the trouble in talking to us between such a crowded place. Thank you for taking that effort. I think we can take up a few questions from the participants before winding.
Yes, sure.
You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself.
I understand at least some of you are in a managerial position or administrative position where you have to find out many things when you start palliative care services. So anyone from that background can.
So in the meantime, let me also say I'm extremely sorry to put you in trouble, as this is kind of I couldn't get away from it. I wanted to be inside in some corner, peaceful, while having this conversation, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. So sorry about that, and thank you for patiently listening all this while with all these interruptions. Yeah, I can take a few questions. I still have 5 minutes or so.
During our initial few sessions, I remember there was a question regarding arranging funds when the insurance matters doesn't work out. I don't remember who exactly asked that question, but maybe we can take up that. So I know that Binod has covered that part, but there was a question during the initial session of ECO. For example, a patient is admitted and there are some treatments available, but the insurance and the government schemes are already overdue or due for payment. So how to, I don't know whether I'm telling the right thing. Who raised that question? Even I don't remember. But that was the question, how to help with the patient, how to deal with that finances.
Okay. So how to raise finances? It's a bit tricky. Now, yeah, obviously the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is if there is an insurance policy that can cover this, well and good. But I don't think there are many private insurance providers, service providers who actually provide um, cover expenses towards palliative care. Most of them are much more comfortable supporting hospitalization and major interventions like an operation and stuff like that. Having said that, we need to explore these possibilities. But of course, the government support is.
Sir will be joining in soon. So meanwhile, you can think about the question and prepare yourself to ask.
Was there a question from Dr. Purina in the initial few sessions regarding some, I don't remember exactly what your question was.
I asked about the Aragyasri. They are unable to pay us in due time. So when we have Aragyasri scheme, how to go about to get any other funds? Because when there is Aragyasri, they won't be giving other funding people. So that was the question of mine.
So you were asking about the funds from the government or from outside the government sector?
Already Aragyasri program is of the government.
Yes, yeah.
They are not paying in time.
Yeah.
So some people are not. We are not able.
We can't hear you, Sister Purina. Your voice is broken.
People because the fund is not coming. Hello.
We couldn't hear you properly. In the last part, we couldn't hear you. Binod, what I understand is that they have Arogyasri, the schemes, but they don't get the payment from the government. They have a lot of overdue. So in that terms, how would they manage the funds?
Just hold on.
Is there any other question that you can type in the chat session before we wind up in another 5 minutes?
Yeah. Sister, the way I would look at it is, I understand, there are schemes that are currently there which could cover, but I believe you're finding it difficult to get them enrolled under one of these schemes. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, actually their hospital suppose the hospital has already spent lakhs and lakhs under this particular project. The government has not paid them back.
Okay.
Yeah. Under that circumstance, what will they do for further funds?
Mm-hmm. I believe this is a typical scenario in many situations where you're depending on government schemes or grants. That is probably the right point where you should look at the community. Look at probably getting a funder or a donor who can actually support that particular person. patient or the family. So, yeah, that is the only probable answer that I can think of right now, because anything else would involve a lot more time and effort, and by the time you figure out how to how to get it done, how to get the support, the I mean, most often we find that the patient is no more, or the family is already in a situation of distress. So probably these are the kind of situations where we need to look at the community for answers. Sorry. There is no straightforward answer for that, sister, but this is what I can think of. Sridevi, you there? Or did I lose you?
Yes, yes, yes. I heard.
Dr. Lillis?
If we are doing any local fundraising, is any government permission needed?
No, the direct answer is no, unless of course you're trying to get some additional benefits out of the government. For example, if you're conducting an event and you want to raise funds by selling tickets, um, typically for such activities you may need to get the what you call the corporation or the municipality to they charge a tax on these kind of ticketed activities. So if you need to have a waiver for that, you need to apply separately, get an exemption from the government. But other than that, if you really want to go ahead and organize something to raise funds for these kind of activities, it's fairly simple and straightforward. And it all depends on the again, the kind of people that you're working with, how powerful they are, how capable they are in organizing these things.
So apart from selling tickets or conducting an event, suppose Sister Dr. Lillis want to collect money from some of the well-wishers, do they need any permission from the government, or what do they need? Do they need an NGO or a charitable trust under which they can keep the money? So what are the requirements?
Okay, so again, you don't need to be registered as an entity separately, but it definitely helps if you have some kind of an entity registered. But it is not a must, and the only thing is, whatever you collect or whatever you dispense, you need to keep proper accounts, whether you are a registered body or not. It doesn't really matter, but as long as you have your accounts intact, that is good enough. The government, if you are looking at exemptions, like for example, if many of the donors would prefer to give money to NGOs which are registered under the ATG, the tax exemption, this thing, 12A and all those things, income tax, for income tax exemption purposes. So if you are looking at those kind of things, yes, you need to have a registered entity and you should apply to the government to have these kind of what you call exemptions well in advance. So otherwise you don't need to have a registered entity. You can go ahead and start the work. Just make sure that you have proper accounts maintained.
So just to summarize that, so suppose if a well-wisher is giving sister an amount of money which for the use in palliative care, she just has to keep an account how much money she received and how much she has spent and for what. Am I right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Unless you are looking for income tax exemption, where you actually need to be registered as a charitable trust. But for a small amount of money which you want to spend for your patients, you don't need any permission from the government, or you don't need a trust or anything. Just have to keep an account very clear that how much you receive, what all you spend, and for whom. That is what needed. Did I answer you?
Yes.
Did Binod answer Sister Lely's question? Is it clear, sister?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for clarifying that, Sridevi.
Thank you. Is there anything else that before we conclude, we already reached the time?
Nobody have raised their hands, ma'am. So you can conclude, I suppose.
Yeah. So thank you so much for everyone for joining, everyone, and thank you, Binod, for taking that effort in between the travel. And if there is any other query that you have in your mind, you can always email to us. We will forward it to Binod and get your answers back. We'll be happy to answer any queries regarding this.